Arizona, USA. Billionaire Ethan Carter was known across the state not just for his vast business empire, but for a personality that felt as sharp and cold as steel. His decisions were logical, his life strictly disciplined, and his heart sealed behind layers of emotional distance. People admired his success, feared his authority, and whispered that there wasn't a single human emotion left inside him. Yet, on a windy evening, when dust storms chased across the desert and the sky burned orange with twilight, something happened that Ethan never expected. A moment was waiting for him, one that would not only test his instincts but also challenge his very nature. After a tense 12-hour board meeting filled with arguments, contracts, and numbers, Ethan left his office with a pounding headache. The usual highway route to his mansion felt too long, so, against his usual cautious nature, he took a lesser-known desert road. The wind howled angrily and sand scraped against his windshield like tiny bullets. Ethan drove silently, eager to reach home, completely unaware that fate had set a trap, one that would force his heart to confront something it had avoided for years: compassion. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, barren and lifeless, until something unusual caught Ethan's eye. At first, he thought it was a pile of cloth, maybe trash tossed carelessly on the ground. But as he drew closer, he saw the form of a small child lying under an old, broken wooden signpost. Ethan pressed the brakes so hard that his car skidded slightly. The sight shook him. A little native Apache girl, fragile, starving, and barely conscious, lay curled on the cold sand. Her ribs were visible, her skin dry, and she looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Her clothes were torn and dusty, perhaps once colorful but now faded like her strength. Her lips trembled as though she was fighting for every breath. But the part that unsettled Ethan the most were her eyes, dark, deep, and filled with silent fear. It wasn't the fear of death. It was something older, heavier, almost as if she carried a secret etched into her soul. Ethan stood frozen beside her, unsure of what to do. He wasn't used to these kinds of situations. His world revolved around deals, money, and power, not helpless children in the middle of nowhere. A voice in his head told him to get back in the car. Someone else will help her, he muttered, convincing himself that the desert wasn't his responsibility. He tried to step away, but his feet didn't move. His conscience, something he thought he outgrew years ago, began to whisper louder. The silence of the desert deepened, and then, just as he turned to walk away, the girl's voice cracked through the air. Barely audible, trembling like a dying flame, she whispered 3 words that Ethan would never forget: "Don't let me die." Those words didn't sound like a plea. They sounded like a prophecy, a message meant just for him. Something broke inside Ethan, a wall he didn't even realize existed. The memories of his own painful childhood, the loneliness he buried under wealth and power, resurfaced unexpectedly. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. Without thinking, without logic or hesitation, Ethan bent down, lifted the fragile child in his arms, and carried her to his car. Her body was so light, it felt as though she could disappear with the slightest breeze. The drive back to his mansion was tense. Ethan kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, afraid that she might stop breathing at any moment. When he reached home, everything moved quickly. He summoned his private medical team, ordered warm blankets, nutritious food, and a room prepared immediately. The mansion staff watched in disbelief. Ethan Carter, who never cared for anyone, was acting like a guardian. Doctors injected fluids, checked vitals, and ensured she was stable. The girl ate slowly, almost cautiously, as if food was something she wasn't sure she deserved. Days passed, and the girl's strength began to return. Her breathing steadied, her skin regained color, and her eyes, those haunting eyes, lost some of their fear, yet held onto something secretive. She barely spoke, answering questions with nods or silence. Ethan tried to learn her name, her family, anything, but she said nothing. It felt as though she was hiding a truth too heavy for her small frame. Ethan didn't know why, but he felt drawn to protect her. Something about this child connected to a part of him he believed was dead. Little did he know, the decision he made on that desert night wasn't random. It was the beginning of a story far bigger than him, one that would demand a price he never expected to pay. It was 7:20 a.m., and sunlight softly filtered into the marble kitchen as Ethan Carter brewed his morning coffee. The aroma filled the air, blending with the stillness of the mansion. It was a quiet morning, too quiet. The child he had rescued 4 days ago was still asleep in the guest room, or so he believed. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to convince himself that life was returning to normal, that his decision to save the girl had been nothing more than a random moment of humanity. He didn't know that peace was about to shatter like glass. Just as he lifted the cup to his lips, a sound exploded across the silence. Thud, thud, thud. It wasn't an ordinary knock. It was a strike, firm, demanding, and heavy enough to make the mansion doors tremble. Ethan's heart raced. His hand froze midair. No one knocked like that on a billionaire's door. It was the type of knock that announced a reckoning, not a visitor. For a brief second, he wondered if it was a threat from a business rival, a lawsuit notice, or something worse. But deep inside, an instinct, one he didn't recognize, warned him that this knock was connected to the girl. He walked toward the entrance, each step echoing through the long hallway. His pulse thudded in his ears, matching the rhythm of the knocks. When he unlocked the door and pulled it open, he felt his entire body go rigid. Standing on the doorstep were 3 Apache women, unlike anyone he had ever seen. The first was elderly, her white hair braided with feathers and beads glistening like old magic. Her posture was straight, her eyes piercing, filled with a wisdom that felt ancient, as if she had witnessed centuries unfold. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stared directly into Ethan's soul. Beside her stood a tall, middle-aged woman, strong and imposing. Her braided hair was long, and ink tattoos curled across her skin like stories etched in symbols Ethan couldn't understand. She looked like a warrior, like someone who could walk barefoot on fire and not feel pain. A spear-like staff rested at her side, and even in its stillness, it radiated danger. The third was younger, close to the rescued girl's age but older in presence. Her eyes were sharp, her hands steady, and she clutched a ceremonial pouch decorated with eagle feathers and red stones. Something contained inside the pouch pulsed faintly, as if alive. She wasn't afraid, she was waiting. Their expressions were serious, carved like stone, neither grateful nor hostile, but something in between. Ethan felt stripped bare under their gaze. He opened his mouth, unsure what to say, but the elderly woman stepped forward first. Her voice was calm, yet carried a weight that silenced even the wind. "You saved our child, now we have come to take her back, and give you something in return." Her words weren't a request, they were a declaration. It sounded less like gratitude and more like destiny unfolding. Ethan tried to process her statement, confused and unsettled. The girl, take her back, what return could justify that? Before he could respond, he felt a presence behind him. Slowly, he turned. The rescued Apache girl stood at the hallway entrance. But she was different, completely different. Her once fragile posture was now straight. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now glowed with confidence, no, with power. It was as if she had awakened into someone else. Her face seemed calm, almost serene, but her gaze carried something Ethan couldn't define, knowledge far too old for a child. The elderly woman's eyes softened when she saw her. The warrior bowed her head slightly. The young woman with the ceremonial pouch whispered a word Ethan didn't recognize, and the pouch vibrated faintly, sending a ripple of cold air across his skin. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, wanting to shield the girl, but she raised her hand, not in fear, but in reassurance. Something told him that she didn't belong to him, that perhaps she never had. Yet, another part of him felt an invisible thread binding their fates together. "You were chosen," the elderly woman said, as if reading his thoughts. "The desert does not send coincidences. Our child crossed your path for a reason. Saving her has opened a door you cannot close." Ethan's breath tightened. He didn't believe in fate, spirits, or prophecy. His world was business, logic, evidence. But nothing about this moment felt ordinary. Something ancient pulsed in the air, like the earth itself was listening. The young Apache woman stepped forward and loosened the tie on the ceremonial pouch. A faint glow escaped, illuminating Ethan's face. The girl behind him whispered something in her native tongue, her voice echoing with a resonance far older than her body. Ethan felt it then. A pull, a sensation deep in his chest, as if his life had shifted into another path without his permission. He didn't know what he was being offered, what he was about to receive, or what it would cost him.